Hi, my wonderful fashionistas. Welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be learning how to sew this beautiful, trendy overbust corset. I have a video already on how to draft and cut it. If that interests you, please subscribe to my channel and let's get started. Welcome once again, great people. So here are my fabric. I have transferred my pattern paper to the fabric, and this is for the front. I added half-inch sewing allowance round everything, as you can see. And on this corner, this tip, look at the way I drafted it, as in when I was adding my allowance. I didn't make it pencil as in like that, but I added the half-inch allowance in a way it will be wide. After sewing it, it will be back to that pencil tip. Also, I added wording to the lining. I didn't add wording to the fabric, and I've ironed stay to both the lining and the fabric. So for this kind of style, it is the lining we are going to be adding most things to. So please watch closely. I've also ironed stay to all the fabric, and I cut 2 for everything. You know, it is two sides of the body. So here it is. And I've added wording also to the middle front, but I did not add wording to the side front because we don't need to add it. So now this is the back pattern. Also I cut 2 each for the sides, and I also cut both lining and the fabric. So please try to use a stronger material for lining. I made use of taffeta here. You can make use of taffeta or doll face material. So here is my front fabric, and I'm working with the lining first. Look at the way I arranged it, as you can see, and you can see the wording I was explaining about. So now you go and sew everything like the way I arrange it from the down part. So you start your sewing from the down part, and this is the result. Look at the way it is looking beautiful. I have joined them together and I also ironed it. So when joining it, please start from the down part, just like the way you sew your bustier. So I've notched my bustier area also, and I've ironed it, and you can see how structured it looks. So please follow the process. So we are going to be caging our bustier, and I am just trying to create a mark on how to create a bustier. The first thing you need to know is that bust caging gives structure to a bustier, and the very first mark you need to make is that place I marked round. Then you will now be making a curve. Your line should not look straight, it should be in a curvy form. Remember, the bustier is looking curvy. Though I did not sew on all these points because I had limited regilin bone, and remember, we're also going to make use of a regilin bone to work on this. But the vital point is your bust point, that point where you join the bustier and everything. So here's the regilin bone I'm going to make use of. It is 1/4 of an inch, 0.25, as you can see. So that what we'll be making use of. And the first point to sew is on this point. Look at the way I'm arranging my boning. Also, do not let your bone go into the seam allowance. So I've gone and sew it on those first 2 points. It might not be convenient because it is you working on curves, but sew on it twice. Please sew on it twice so it can be secured. And here it is what it looks like. So now I'm going to sew on that point that I joined my bustier, and I also sew on some other points, and I will let you see with the points I was talking about. So here is what it looks like after I have caged my bustier. Remember, I said I had limited regilin bone, so I made sure that I sew on the point where I joined the bustier so it can give it structure on that point to push it out. Then I also sew extra 2, one on my bust point and one on the upper chest point, so it will give me a good and beautiful result. And look at it. In fact, I even prefer it this way than when the regilin bone is always very much. But if you want to do more than this, you can do. So now we are going to be covering the boning, and that procedure is called fleshing. It is called fleshing of the boning. So I'll make sure that I add enough hemming gum. This is called an hemming gum. I'll add enough on that part, and using my wording, I will try to cut out the shape of that the part I caged, and I'll cover it, just that part that you caged alone. So you can do it more than once or twice so that it will be strong. Then I'll use my paper stay to also cover it. The paper stay too, you can iron like 3 times or 4 layers of it. So here are the lining for the back. Also remember that you have to always use your pattern paper to arrange all this. So don't throw away your pattern paper. You have to, because this is what will be guiding you. So arrange it like this and go and join everything together, but don't join it at the center. So I've joined it and you can see what I'm talking about. The center is where the eyelet and the ropes will be passed through, and that is at the end of this cloth when it is being made. So now I'll bring in my front pattern, my front lining that I've sewn, and I will join the back together with the front at the side. So please pin this part before you join it so you can get good result. And there is it. So I will advise you to go and open the seam using your bust arm. If you don't know how to make a bust arm, I will add a video to that. So now we are still going to be sewing regilling bone to the neckline area so it can have structure, so that neckline design will be able to stand. So now we are going to measure our seam allowance. From this corner, come in by 1 inch. Then from the upper part, come in by 0.75, 3/4 inch. Same thing with the side. So that way the regilling bone will not go into the seam allowance. Please, all this thing I'm telling you, try to take note of it, because when you are trying to turn the lining and the fabric together, that's when you know that you should have gotten it right. So please try to get it right. I will now be making use of my 1/2 inch regilling bone, though it's not up to 1/2 inch, but it's almost 1/2 inch. So now I'm going to sew on the upper neckline area. The reason why I'm sewing this is to give that pointy neckline. You know, the neckline has a scoop neckline, a pointy edge, so it can give it structure. So also try to make sure that you measure the seam allowance on the second part also and sew twice. So here is what I have done, and as you can see, now the second point we are going to be sewing the regilling bone is from that place to just the middle of our bustier. So try to make sure that the bone is placed on the wording, not on the fabric, because all these regilling bone, they can be very sharp in nature, and with time it can pierce out of the fabric and hurt your skin, and you will not want something that will be hurting you. So place it on the wording. So I placed mine on the wording and I've sewn the two for both sides. You can see the way the neckline is now standing and it has more structure, so that's the reason for doing that. So now we are going to be sewing our boning also on the lining at the back area. So you measure 0.75 up, and using those points that we join, you are going to sew the regilling bone on it. So you come down also on this point with 0.5 inch or even 1 inch. You can do 1 inch, it is also okay that way, just for it not to go into the seam allowance, because at times all this boning needs to shift when you are sewing it. So now I'm going to be sewing my regilling bone, because we are going to be casing. All this thing is just like we casing it, and that's just a way of, you don't need to be start sewing a case for it, and or you just use your bone to sew to the lining. So that is what I'm just doing here, as you can see. If you have any question concerning this video, please ask me in the comment section, I'll answer you. And please make sure your work is very neat. Any part that you feel is not neat enough, lose it and try to sew it again. So for the point where our eyelet will be, as in, you have to also make sure that piece is structured. At the seam area, I will measure 1/2 inch inside. I'll try to measure 1/2 inch down, and also remember to come up by 0.5 inch. Don't let it get into your seam allowance. You can see I did not let the regilling bone to get into the seam allowance. I'll measure 0.5 inch, and now I'll place my regilling bone beside that mark and I will start sewing. Please watch this video more than twice. There's a lot involved, so at any information you missed at the first time you watch it, you will not miss it at the second time. So now I'll be sewing it twice also, and I'm also going to still add more bone to this. So from that bone now, I will measure 1 inch. That point where that 1 inch is where we are going to be creating our eyelet channel after this cloth is fully ready. So now I'll measure 1 inch and I'll come down by 0.5 inch so that the regilling bone would get into the seam allowance, as I've explained. And I'll measure my 1 inch down, and on the down part also I'll come up by 0.5 inch, like we've been doing since. By now you should be familiar with that part. And I'm going to sew my regilling bone also. So I intentionally let you to see all these procedures so that you'll be able to understand what I'm explaining about. Please make sure your work is very neat. So if you still have enough regilling bone, you can still sew in between. You can still add more bones to the back fabric, and but if you do not have, this is okay. Though I later still added more. So now here's the result. I've ironed them. As you can see that I still added one more in between. This will just give it more structure. So this is the front pattern. I have also joined everything, but remember, we are not caging the bustier area, and we did not add word into it. But here is everything, and you can see I've ironed it and I've joined every part just the way we joined the back pattern. But the only difference is we did not cage the front pattern, and we did not iron wording or boning to any part. So after that, now we are going to be sewing our boning channel. You see this design here, we are going to be using our boning and fabric to create that design. So you can choose to be creative in different ways for the channels, but I'm going to be using my seam allowance as a guide. So I have this white fabric here as the design, and my 0.5 inch bone, Regilene bone, is what I'll be using. So I'll measure 2 inches or 2.5 inches thereabout for the width, and the length I'll cut as long as I can cut. So I'll pick my Regilene bone, then I'll wrap it twice. I'll use the fabric, I'll use it to wrap it twice, leaving a little fabric at the side. Then I will place it on the line, as in on the seam allowance I said I am going to be using as a guide to sew the Regilene bone. So let me show you what I'm explaining at the sewing machine. So you wrap your Regilene bone, the fabric with the Regilene bone twice. Then you will place it on the part you want, the point you want to join you want to place the design on, and you sew down. But as you are sewing, make sure that your needle picks the Regilene bone. You are not just sewing on the fabric, you are sewing on both the Regilene bone and on the fabric, so it can hold it well. Then you sew down, and now after I've sewn it down, you will try to open it a little, as in not opening, but just see. You can see that when I'm opening it, that it picked both the fabric and Regilene bone. If it doesn't pick it well, I advise you to lose it and re-sew it. Reason being that you need the Regilene bone to be stable. And also, when you are sewing it, come down by 1 inch or 0.75 inch. Do not let it go straight into the sewing allowance. Remember the way we've been sewing our Regilene bone to the lining. Same thing applies to this part also. Then you are going to trim down. Look at what I'm trimming here. You are going to trim down like so. Then you sew on the second point. So now to my machine, I am going to be sewing on the second point. So on that first point, please, I am emphasizing on that point that when you are sewing, make sure your Regilene bone comes down. Though the white will be showing, but your Regilene bone should come down by 0.75 before you start sewing. So you are going to be arranging and sewing, and after that, this is the result. And also, when you are trying to sew on the bust area, try to push your Regilene bone well, so that everything will blend on the bust area. So now we are going to be turning the lining and the main fabric together. Now I'm going to arrange the lining and the main fabric together. And the first thing I'll do is I'll try to arrange the lining piece like this, and I will notch the center, as in so I can know the center that I'll be pinning to. I have already notched the main fabric also. Then I will pin it only on the neckline area. So we are going to go and sew on the neckline area using the 1/2 inch sewing allowance that we added. So I have gone ahead to sew it. Now I'm going to notch the neckline. So you have to notch everything. So you take your time to notch everything round, like the way I'm doing. And also, please, if you have watched this video up to this level, please subscribe to my channel, like, share, and also drop those lovely comments. Now after that, I am going to also trim it off so that the neckline area won't be too bulky. That's the reason why we are trimming it. Then the next thing for me to do now is to sew the armhole area. Then you try to flip the seam allowance facing the lining area. So I've done that, and I will notch it also. So like the way we did for the neckline area, I will notch everything round, and after notching it round, I will also trim it off. If you have any question, ask me in the comment section. I will also repeat the same thing on this side. Then afterwards, we'll be joining it on the sides. As you can see, we'll be joining them on the sides, and I will also notch that corner. We don't need to notch the sides. Then after that, I will flip it to the right side. I didn't show the process, but it might be a little bit inconvenient, but please take your time when you are turning the lining and the fabric. Then after that, I'm going to be using my bust arm to iron the lining and the fabric. You have to give it a very good press. You steam press water, as in when I mean press it, you need to give it a very good press. So now I am going to be readjusting the bust area, because when you are turning it, it will still look like as if they've not fit well into each other, and you have to readjust and tuck it in. So using my hemming gum, I'm going to be cutting out a lot of hemming gum. Then I will dip it into the bustier area. Only that bustier area, as in that part that we caged, that's just the only part you need to add this hemming gum, not all the body of the clothes. Please take note, just that point. In fact, you should not go into the side of that bustier, just that caging area alone, so that the main fabric and the lining will be able to be together, as in they will be firm together. That's just why we are doing that. So please, because once you've ironed hemming gum, it will be hard to undo. That's why I'm emphasizing on this. Then after that, you iron from the right side. So I've done that, and you'll notice that the bustier is now more structured because we've done it. So this is something you have to take your time to do. Then afterwards, you remember that structure design we added on the hip area. We are going to be sewing our regling bone on that point, because if we do not sew it, it won't give that structure that we need to get. So now I'm going to use my pin to hold the lining and the main fabric together, so that the lining won't be shifting, because we'll be sewing it from the right side. Then after I have pinned it, I'll bring in my fabric, my 2-inch fabric and my regling bone. And this time around, because we are not going to be turning it, I'll have to fold the fabric down first, so that the upper part will be covered. Then I'll place my regling bone, dragging it down by 0.5 inch, and I will fold it twice and sew. Remember, I've explained this earlier, so I'll sew it on those points, on those hip area down, so that it will give it structure. And afterwards, we are going to be closing the hem area, and to do that, I am going to cut out 2 inches of fabric, and I'll make sure it is very long. And after that, I'll try to sew it round. But before you sew it, make sure you pin your lining and fabric also together, so that it will not be shifting. So after I've sewn the first part, I will notch everything. You need to notch it. You don't need to trim it off, but make sure you notch it. Then all those pointy tips where the hip area is, try to trim some things off, because regling bone is around that area, so you have to trim it off. So I'm going to be notching everything like the way I'm doing. I'll trim off those pointy points, and I will also notch around. Then this edge, I'll also trim it off. I'll trim that edge off. And after that, I am going to be neatly casing it. So remember, we turned it from the front to the back, not from the back to the front. So I'm going to be making a video on how you can create eyelets on your corset, so watch out for that video. This video is very long already, that's why I didn't add it to this. And also, if you find this video helpful, please subscribe to my channel, like, share and comment. So here's the end of this video. I hope you learned something new. See you in my next one. Until then, keep winning. Bye.